Hello, my name is Anthony Corbin, and this is my Fall Capstone 2014 defense. And I'd like to present to you the Corbin engine. I'm not the best at naming, so that's what I came up with. The goal of this engine is to be inspired by Unity and allow developers to focus on creating games and not making shapes show up on the screen. So for those who are in the game dev classes, you may remember trying that first time you got a circle to show up on the screen. You're so excited because it's a lot of work. And actually, a lot of inspiration from this project came from when many students were struggling with getting their engines to work with one of Jamie's classes. Since his class wasn't focused on engine development, he allowed me to port my engine over as middleware for other students to use. I enjoyed the process so much because I was able to create this API that allowed other users to put stuff up on the screen without having to do all the horrible work of managing buffers, that I wanted to keep on continuing that and make an entire GUI so you don't even have to write C++ anymore. All you have to work with is a Lua API that I created. Lua is a scripting language that I feel is very similar to JavaScript. I developed an API with that interacts with my engine. Lua is also known for being very fast and easy to integrate with other languages. But there's no better way to show off an engine than to actually make something in it. So I'm going to make Connect 4 for you. So I've loaded up a basic project. So far I have added a couple objects, a couple textures, just so that process can go easier. So for a Connect 4 board, we need an actual board. So we're going to go under Add Component, add a renderable component. We need to specify the geometry. So I'm going to make a Connect 4 board. This is something I already had modeled in Maya. And let's put a interesting looking texture on it. That way we can distinguish it a little better from the background. We also need to add a Lua script component. And this is going to be the bread and butter, all of the awesome things that my engine's able to do. This Lua script, it focuses on interacting with my engine. So right here, I'm actually setting up and saving various renderables from my engine. I check for keyboard input. I actually play the game and update the renderable's position on the screen. This contains all of the logic for Connect 4, as well as all the logic for cloning and placing objects. Because my engine has no idea what Connect 4 even means, so I had to tell it via Lua. So when I add a Lua script, you'll notice that it has script editor params. The way that you're able to pass an editor object into the script in order to clone and to be able to use is through this string right here. So this is how we're going to specify our player 1 and our player 2 game piece. So sweet, we could play Connect 4, except it wouldn't look really pretty because our player 1 piece and our player 2 piece don't show anything on the screen. So let's change that and set the geometry to a Connect 4 piece. And we can also change the texture. I'm going to do that as well for the player 2. All right, and congratulations, we now have a Connect 4 game. And it's very simple to play. You simply use the arrow keys 1 through 7 in order to place Connect 4 pieces down. This is written 100% in Lua and interacting with my engine in order to display and update everything. The way it's currently set up, when one player wins, like I'm about to do right now, the board wipes out ready for you to play again. If you look over here on the side, you can actually see that I cloned the player pieces quite a bit. So I've actually created duplicates of these original 2 pieces, attached them to the board, and placed them correctly. All of this is happening via a scripting language Lua, which is something we haven't worked with at all in any of our engine classes, as well as interacting with a complex entity component design. One other feature that I'd like to show off, so I just loaded up an entirely new file. It's still Connect 4, but this one has a new feature that I implemented recently of multiple cameras. So this one scene is actually being rendered 4 separate times from 4 separate cameras. All you have to do is actually add another camera component and you can re-render the scene. This is actually a suggestion I got from Coulter when he said that it was one of his favorite features of Unity, that he could just re-render the scene from another camera perspective, so I threw it into my engine as well. So this is showing my engine. Hopefully it looks nice and simple, easy to use, but this really doesn't display a lot of the hard work I put into this. Because what I'm really most proud of this project is the code behind that I did in order to create this. Now, I pride myself on being a very lazy programmer who doesn't like to do a lot of work. But I'm very proactive about my laziness. I like to create systems that are very easy to use. This is an example of my serialization. So this C++ doesn't have any built-in functionality for serializing complex types. So right now, this is actually saving out 2 doubles, which is a primitive data type. Material is a complex data type that implements a serializable interface. And they can all just be chained together in order to serialize into a stream that I've created. This also implements type safety, so if you try to serialize something that's not serializable, I blow up in your face and say you're not allowed to do that right when you compile. I also created an event system that is also type safe. For emitting events, this is when a resource is loaded. This contains, by emitting this, just by instantiating a class and passing it down to emit event, it knows what event to emit as well as all the data associated with it. I subscribe to those events, again using a type. Before, when I originally had this implemented, it was using strings so that you can have these. If you type it out incorrectly, you're now subscribing to something that doesn't exist. So using template functions and lambda expressions, I have type-safe events that all are fired off absolutely gorgeously. Another thing I'm extremely proud of is the Lua interface I was able to create. I took a lot of inspiration from Unity for this. Lua doesn't have classes built into its language, but I have actually manipulated Lua in order to emulate classes and act like their own script components. So they have a start, they have an update, you're able to get Lua objects, you're able to clone them, and some of that's displayed in here. So my game manager, this is actually interacting with my editor in order to get an entity. That entity is then converted into a Lua object. I'm then able to query other scripts from that Lua object. I'm able to clone that object. I'm able to manipulate its transform information. All of these are very complex C++ objects that I've been able to convert to be usable in Lua using methods and primitive data types. And it looks like that's all the time I have right now. I will now be taking any questions.
Anthony, can you remind me why you chose Lua?
Lua, it's actually I would like to have integration for other languages, but Lua was originally introduced to me by Jamie. It's well known for being very fast as well as easy to integrate in languages.
So, follow-up question: do you anticipate being able to let anybody use any scripting language to make this work, like R or Python or something like that?
It is something that I would love to implement. Say, for instance, take Unity. You can write in JavaScript or in C#, but their C# interface is very well defined, as well as well documented, easy to work with. I would like to have my focus working with one scripting language. Right now, that's Lua, so I'm putting my focus into making that a wholesome API.
With your multiple cameras, have you tried hooking up to the Rift at all or anything like that?
It's not something that I had time to implement. It's definitely something that I'm looking into the future. We actually have a Jamie class that's coming up that's going to be working with the Oculus Rift, and I would love to get my engine compatible with the Oculus.
Anthony, I have no programming experience, so help me understand what kind of time savings result from using your tool.
Well, my engine is, you currently have about 15,000 lines of code working for you in order to get everything to actually show up on the screen. The rendering process, actually if you look along this right here, I'm creating shaders which interpret how you display various points onto the screen. I'm then providing all the transform informations because your screen is defined with a very generic setup going -1 to 1 and -1 to 1. I'm providing everything so you don't have to worry about transforming a model type into the world and then into screen space. I'm handling all those transformations for you. I'm handling passing those down into the shader. I'm also handling adding and destroying components and components like being able to render, being able to run scripts. It's a lot of generically set up code that actually take that as a compliment, saying that it looks easier to use.
Do you let other people test your app and see how they compare to Unity, and what are the feedback?
Currently, Matt Johnson, he has a copy of my engine, but due to the very minimal amount of time that I gave him to actually make something in it, he wasn't able to produce something for me to show to you today. I had a couple bugs that ran me up closer to presentation than I would have liked, mainly that dealt with serialization, because it's very finicky in C++. But I am definitely looking into the future, because I definitely want to see something that Matt creates using my engine. Because I made Connect 4, and truth be told, I'm really not that much of a game designer. I like making the stuff that other people can use.
You thought about open source in this one?
Well, technically it is already open source. It's up on GitHub. Full source is available. I would like to get feedback on my source code, as well as continue to refine that with user feedback.
So to piggyback off of that, this is obviously a really sweet addition to your portfolio. Do you really foresee putting this out as a competitor, direct competitor to Unity?
Currently, it's not a competitor to Unity, but it is something that I want to continue to develop. I learned more about C++ coding this, about lambda expressions, template functions, and utilizing pound defines effectively than I've done with any other project. But I do think that I can continue to refine this code, because the code that's inside this project is some of the code that I'm most proud of. Even if this project in and of itself doesn't become something that I market, which I do hope to do, but I will have to have more refinement, there are libraries that I've created that are most definitely useful. And I have a lot of work with manipulating the console, as well as I also overloaded a way of printing off messages that actually have a built-in ignore threshold. So in C++, you can't just concatenate numbers to strings to complex objects. But I provided a interface that overloads the comma operator that allows you to concatenate all that together very fluidly. You also may have noticed when I first started my project, this nice red text that showed up. That's actually an error. So I have libraries that manipulate the console, as well as change how you are able to display things very easily from a programming perspective.
And this is all you, right? You didn't pull this off of?
Correct. I actually used very few resources from online, because a lot of what I wanted to do isn't available online. Because one thing I like doing is making C++ act like a higher level language. Because C++ is kind of evil to work in, with very primitive data types, really finicky aspects to it. So I like manipulating that in order to make it easier to use.
How long have you had this up on GitHub?
This is actually originally seeded from my old engine from development, but I think there's probably like 3 lines of code left from the engine we've developed in Jamie classes. So the project has been up on GitHub since then, but this newfound engine has been up for about 10 weeks.
And can you tell whether people have used it?
Currently, it has not been used by others.
You didn't talk about, but you have physics simulation in this as well?
I do have physics, but it's not implemented as a component. So it is something that I have all the physics equations written out. It's just not tightly packed into a component. And those components are very easy to add to expand my engine. So adding particle effects, adding collision, that will be very easy to add in the future. Emerson.
Currently, if you wanted to give this engine to someone else to script in, do you have a rough beginning documentation on how to use the API? Or where do we go if we want to use it?
Matt can tell you my documentation is in the works. Because I've developed a lot of systems in Lua, and they are currently not well documented. I have a lot of the source code if you want to just look at that, but I'm still in the process of converting it so it's well commented for other people to actually use.
What sorts of components do you provide to developers straight out of
Currently, I provide a camera component, a script component, and a renderable component. Using that, you can create very simple games of stuff shows up on the screen, I can dodge stuff, I can move stuff. In Lua, you have the a full 3D math library that I created. So you'll have the ability to lerp things as well as provide smooth transitions. I focus mainly on making the script component very powerful, so you're able to query other script components, so you're not limited just to your own little box. You can go off to the editor, say like, hey editor, give me this entity and give me the script component that I wrote off that entity.
Okay, that's time.